Okay, so welcome back to everybody except like one person who is like welcome for the first time, and welcome to the people at home. This is Philosophy 251, History of Ancient Philosophy. At our last meeting, we just I'd set the seating chart. We got to talk to one another a little bit. It wasn't a normal talk, was it?
Very Socratic.
Yeah, it was a little bit Socratic. Yeah, I asked you a question, you gave me an answer, and then I poked back. I was like, really? And I asked another question. Maybe I tried to pull somebody else in, ask them a question. Very Socratic. We'll see exactly what that means when we start reading some early Platonic dialogues and we get to see Socrates in action. I tried to cram at the end of our discussion something that I wanted to talk about in a little bit more detail, and that was this question of like, why should we study ancient philosophy in the first place? This is on the syllabus. It's something that's mentioned in the course description, but I didn't give all the answers on the syllabus. In fact, I don't even know if I gave the best answer on the syllabus. One of the very, very easy answers for why it is that we should study ancient philosophy, after all, these are ideas that are 2,000 years old. Today we're going to start talking about the Milesian philosophers. We're going to hear Thales say that everything's made out of water, and that's just like a crazy, stupid, there's no way that that's true. So why do we study it in the first place? One of the reasons why we study these old ideas, even ones that we might say like, that's obviously not true, I'll caution you against that sort of thinking where like you see something and it's strange and you're like, that's obviously not true. Maybe not so obviously. One of the reasons why we study this is because it's where we come from. It's where like our contemporary culture comes from. This is a canon of like philosophical texts and readings and ideas. It's a conversation that's been going on for a long, long time, and it's had a tremendous impact on the way that Western culture has developed. Now, Western culture isn't the only culture. This is something that's obviously true. And a class like this is certainly open to the criticism that like we're focusing on a certain, or we're kind of continuing a little bit of a colonialist structure of like creating knowledge, where we say like, here's like the important knowledge. It's the knowledge that kind of ran through Western Europe and our idea of like what the dominant culture is. I'm totally cool with accepting those sorts of critiques. I think in order to make those sorts of critiques, you got to know what you're critiquing. So whether we're talking about Greek philosophical movements as informing our culture, or whether we want to talk about them as kind of informing a sort of story of cultural dominance that needs to be critiqued, we still need to study these things. It's a way of kind of coming to grips with like where we are now based on where we've come from. So that's one reason. That's a kind of like standard history of ideas sort of reason for why it is that you would study ancient texts. Another reason why we might want to study these things, does anybody remember? It's the second reason that's given on the syllabus. I think I mentioned it at our last meeting too. Yeah, Nicole.
Was it that many of the questions hasn't exactly gone away?
Yeah, there's still live questions. We were talking about some of this stuff at our last meeting. Were some of these, like, the questions that I asked you, the topics that came up, were some of you like, yeah, that is, like, something that I'm genuinely curious about. For some of you, it might have been like, I've never really thought about that before. Like, change. Do you think about change? Is change an important concept? We're going to interrogate the hell out of the concept of change in a couple of weeks here. So yeah, this is still a big problem. These are not problems that have been solved. They're questions that have been asked. They're attempts to answer those questions. A conversation has been started about these ideas, but they're not ideas that exactly go away. Even if we were to think that like there is philosophical progress the same way that there's scientific progress, where like we kind of move forward and we're like, yeah, the people before us were wrong, and we've got the right theory now, and then maybe a couple of 100 years later somebody else is like, no, that was wrong, we've got the right theory now. Even if we have some idea that we're progressing, these are ideas that like you kind of need to like walk through for yourself. Sometimes people complain that philosophy seems to not make any progress. We've been at it for like over 2,000 years, and we still haven't seemed to have answered any of these questions. At a certain point, we might say like, hey, humans, like stop trying. Obviously, this isn't working. You're not coming up with any real answers. And I don't know if that's entirely true. Something like, what is justice? We still fight over what is justice. We still have incredible disagreements about what is justice. I don't know that that means that we haven't settled it. It just maybe means that not everybody's gotten the message. Because it's not the sort of thing that you can just hand to somebody and say like, here's a definition of justice. Now you understand what justice is. It's the sort of thing that needs to be understood through grappling with the concept. understanding like the problems, getting a sense of like what the conceptual landscape around a concept is like. Yes, is it Chauncey?
Yeah.
Yeah, Chauncey.
If all these truths keep changing over time, like you're saying, doesn't
Oh,
that mean
I
there
didn't
is
say the
no,
truths keep changing over time.
well, accepted truths or things of that nature?
Can we call them beliefs?
Yeah, beliefs.
Sure. Beliefs keep changing over time.
Doesn't that mean that really no belief can be considered objective?
Is that a belief? Yeah. Is that a belief that could change over time? Or is that the only truth? Like that thing is true for all time, that no beliefs can be accepted with any certainty. Except this one. Ooh, that's interesting. If you're certain about something, Wilson says, if you're certain about something, that doesn't mean that it's true.
People who like rob banks and stuff are probably certain that they're going to get away with it.
Oh, they felt certain, but I don't know if they were certain.
That's a belief.
Yeah.
You believe,
To actually be certain.
I think they're certain in their belief that.
Is certainty a feeling? It might not be. Might have to do with the quality of your justification. We're getting into territory that's not really quite this class just yet. Yeah, Nicole?
Imagine a few holes in moral relativism, but my question was actually about your opinion on justice, if you agreed with Hobbes, how it derives from common power and fear.
That is a totally awesome question for office hours that lies outside the scope of what we're going to be talking about today and kind of like for the whole semester. So no, I don't agree with Hobbes, and we can talk about it more in office hours. Because the answer isn't interesting, right? The explanation of the answer, the account that's given to justify the answer, the way that we explain like why it is that we think that we do, that's what's interesting. That's what's useful for us. And this brings us to the third reason why we study ancient philosophy that isn't even on the syllabus, it's so secret. I forgot to write it. And because like if the course description had come to one page already, it was time for a page break, I was like, all right, let's leave it there. But I think maybe one of the most interesting answers, and I did get into this a little bit at the end of our last meeting, is that it opens up our world to like seriously read these texts and engage them in a way that isn't a sort of like philological stamp collecting, where we say like Thales says this, Anaximander says this, Anaximines says this, the Pythagoreans said this. If I just have like a list of people's sayings, I don't really know them. I'm not striking up any sort of real conversation with them. They're not like part of my life. There's a scene, are you guys familiar with the movie Good Will Hunting? Mm-hmm. There's a scene in Good Will Hunting where the late Robin Williams' character asks Will Hunting, Matt Damon's character, he says like, who are your friends? Who are the people like in your life that kind of like move your soul or whatever? And Will is like, I got plenty of friends. And he's like, well, tell me, who are they? And it's like Nietzsche, Kant, Locke, O'Connor, and Robin Williams says, yeah, but those people are dead. Like you don't actually have any sort of give and take with them. That's an interesting point. If you don't have any friends who are alive, you might want to like think about that. That's like something to maybe rectify. But I don't think that it's true that you can't have friends who are dead. I don't think it's even true that you can't have friends that like have been dead for a long, long time, dead for like thousands of years. And the way that you become friends with them is you have a conversation. How are you going to have a conversation with a text? Text doesn't talk back. I read it, it talks at me, and then I ask it a question. Does it talk? Well, yeah, it kind of does. And this is a big part of what I'm going to try to push in the way that we approach these texts. Hopefully we're going to get a sense of it today when we look at what seem like really kind of innocent, simple ideas. And in asking these questions and interrogating them and really making an effort to understand them on their own terms, there's a little bit of give and take. There's a little bit of what Hans Georg Gadamer calls a fusion of horizons, where like I learn to see through somebody else's perspective, but it's not really their perspective, and it's not really my perspective. It's this synthesis that happens when I bring my sensibilities to honestly trying to understand what somebody else's sensibilities are. You can screw this up by forcing somebody else's ideas into your own boxes. You kind of have to loosen up a little bit. And a big part of that is resisting this urge to just kind of reject something as obviously silly and not worth paying attention to. We're going to take all of these ideas seriously. If for no other reason than people have been taking them seriously for more than 2,000 years, and we might just be curious about what all these so-called smart people think is so great about all these bits of text. So I don't even know, like, now I'm starting to wonder, like, why do I even make this pitch? You're already in the class. I should be making this pitch to people who are enrolled in the class. But that's why we do what we're doing in this course. Are there any, Michael, you seem like you maybe had something?
Oh, I was thinking about something entirely different.
Oh, okay. I must be getting boring then. Yeah.
Why should we study this stuff? What was written on the oracle to Apollo Delphi?
Oh, what? Know thyself? Or yeah, know thyself. Well, but yeah, to know myself, do I have to know Thales in order to know myself? Do I have to know Plato in order to know myself? Some people might think about this as like, I want to think for myself. I want to have my own ideas. I'll do like Descartes did. I'll just kind of like go off into a cabin all by myself. I'll like lock myself away. I'll get rid of all of my beliefs and I'll start over from scratch, pretending like I'm not importing anything into this meditation process that wasn't already there. I'm not sure, like, you can think for yourself without necessarily thinking by yourself. That's what I think is like really cool about philosophy, is that it gives you the tools, it gives you the practice for thinking with other people. And honestly, I think that's the best way to be with other people. That's the best way to have a friendship. What are the best sorts of conversations that you've had with like your really good, like they're like people who are your acquaintances, and then there are your friends, your really good friends, capital F friends. Have you had long conversations with them that go on like deep into the night, where you talk about the things that are like most important? Like, I think this is the most important thing. And then you hear what they have to say. And it's that you agree a little bit, enough for the conversation to happen, but maybe they see it a little bit differently. And you're like, God, like this is me getting to know you. This is, I think, one of the coolest things about the way that humans act with one another. And why limit yourself to a small world where like you have just a community of people who think exactly the same? This is a big problem that we have today. A big social issue is that like we have bubbles, like ideological bubbles. And some of this is exacerbated by the way that we technologically mediate our experiences with one another. You only hear from the people who agree with you. Start hearing from people that you're like, I disagree with those. Unfriend, never hear from them again. And they do the same. They unfriend you, and they stick to their bubble. And over here in their bubble, they're like, what the fuck is wrong with those guys? They're crazy. And over here, they're like, what the hell is wrong with those guys? They're totally crazy. But there's no actual conversation. That's unfortunate to have such a small world. Make a bigger world. A world so big that like anybody who's ever thought and wrote it down at least, or talked aloud so that other people could write it down, they're part of your community too. Okay. That's why we do philosophy. This is ancient philosophy. Today we're going to be talking about the pre-Socratic philosophers. And out come the notebooks. The pre-Socratic philosophers, what an unfortunate name. The pre-Socratic philosophers. If I was a pre-Socratic philosopher and somebody called me a pre-Socratic philosopher, I'd be like, whoa, come on, man. Like, I can't be taken on my own terms. I'm just like what happened before Socrates. That's... My sister complains about that. Any of you guys younger siblings of older siblings that were like very popular and made a big mark, say like in school, and all the teachers were like, oh, you're so-and-so's brother. You're so-and-so's sister. And you're like, I'm my own person. Yeah, that's too bad that we call these guys pre-Socratics. But I think we'll notice when we get to the early Platonic dialogues and we see what Socrates is up to, we're going to say something along the lines of like, whoa, something really big, like a big change happened between the pre-Socratics and the Socratics. So it's worth kind of grouping them together. I think we should be wary of this title for the group, this way of classifying them, saying like, well, what they all have in common is they're all before Socrates. It prevents us from taking them seriously on their own terms, but it's a convention that like doesn't just fall out of the sky. It makes a little bit of sense. Pre-Socratic philosophers are sometimes argued to be the first philosophers. In fact, this is like how a lot of like the discussions about like why we take Thales seriously, why it is that we talk about Thales, even still today, is sometimes people say like he was the first philosopher. First philosopher? Anybody who ever tries this project, right? Anybody who ever tries to say, like, this person was the first, like, this moment right here, that's when philosophy first happened, you're running into all kinds of potential criticism. Some folks can say, like, first philosopher? Come on, somebody else got there before they did. This is just maybe the first one that we know of. And we're like, all right, and right, it's the first one that we know of. And we're like, actually, somebody else, we have like an obscure scroll that we found, and it's like, oh, they were doing philosophy earlier than that. And we might also say, like, first philosopher, that's not philosophy yet. It's proto-philosophy, maybe. But it's not, you're close, but it's not quite philosophy. In order to even begin that sort of conversation about who the first philosopher is, or what the first moment of philosophy was, maybe to like even begin to analyze this cultural trope that says began in Greece, is to ask like what a philosopher is in the first place. What is a philosopher? What is philosophy? We mentioned this a little bit at the end of our last meeting, but it bears repeating. So let's start there. What is philosophy? Yes. Oh wait, I was going to the back, but yeah, yes? And what was that, just to repeat it?
Well, I was in another philosophy class yesterday, and the teacher had said, like, philosophy is the love of knowledge or the love of wisdom.
Ooh, yeah. In fact, I'm going to even, like, I'll ask you after, who said it was the love of knowledge? It's the love of wisdom. Yeah. In fact, we can do this etymologically. The truth is, if you put, like, 10 philosophers in a room and you ask them, like, what is philosophy, you're going to get, like, 15 different answers. But they'll all agree that, like, part of the answer to, like, what philosophy is to break it up into its etymology. Philein, Sophia. Now, that's what philosophy is. It's Philein, Sophia. It's Philein. You know this root, right? Philein, like pedophile, or hydrophilic compounds for all the chemists in the house. Yeah. What does Philein mean? Philadelphia. Love. Yeah, love. And what is Sophia? Sophia is my aunt. No. What is Sophia? We're going to find other words for knowledge, like episteme, which is kind of like that's going to be one of the words that like really gets settled into for knowledge, the Greek words for knowledge. These are Greek, by the way. Almost all of the like funny sounding words that we're going to use in this course, they're Greek. Yeah, love of wisdom, like somebody who's sophisticated, right? That root is like still active there, has some sort of wisdom. And is wisdom the same as knowledge, by the way? Like, why would I even get itchy about making a distinction there? Are they the same? No, not really. Yeah, Joaquin.
So knowledge has like the word know in it. I feel like knowledge has a connotation of assurance, something you
Of assurance.
something that's concrete, not really abstract.
Huh.
It's not something that's like tangible.
Something that's tangible, yeah. Knowledge, like, to have knowledge is like to know certain facts,
Right.
right? And if you know lots of facts, you have lots of knowledge.
Yeah.
But knowing facts, is that wisdom? Yeah.
I think wisdom is kind of like learning through experience.
Learning through experience, it seems like experience is required in order to have wisdom. You can have knowledge without experience, maybe. But hard to have wisdom without experience? Which would this suggest that like young people who kind of, just due to the nature of time itself, young people who haven't had a whole lot of experience can't be wise. Like old people, not all of them, but old people are wise. That's right. Some young people have had lots. Well, could just not be experienced. Like, where's somebody asleep for a long time? I suppose that could happen. Yeah. Michael?
I would classify wisdom personally as the ability to examine your knowledge, like if you want to use a tomato as a metaphor. You can say that a tomato is a fruit.
Yeah, knowledge will tell you that tomatoes are fruit. Yeah.
But wisdom would tell you that it wouldn't be a good idea to put it in fruit salad.
Yeah, which is, I don't know that that's, like, if you've ever had a tomato and watermelon fettuccine salad, that's a fruit salad with tomatoes, I think. It's pretty damn tasty.
You say
But
that
yeah.
enhanced wisdom.
Yeah, but yeah, sure. Yeah, maybe like sometimes we might think of it as like wisdom is maybe it partially consists of knowledge. You can't know nothing and be wise, could you? Could you know nothing at all and be wise? Yeah, William?
Well, doesn't experience have more to do with knowledge? Because everyone agrees that, okay, so a baby has no experience or little to no experience,
Yeah.
so it has no knowledge.
Right. Seems good so far.
It's more like the filtering of your experiences correctly in order to.
Yeah, it's almost like figuring out, kind of like what Michael was getting at. It's not just having knowledge; it's knowing what to do with the knowledge, or maybe like knowing the difference between the important things to know and like the not so important things to know. When we get to Socrates, we'll find out a big part of it's also knowing when you know something and when you don't know something. Wisdom's a little bit of a mushy term. Sophia, a little bit of a mushy term. But I feel like we're kind of zeroing in on it. We have some. If I said wisdom, you wouldn't be like, "What the hell does that mean?" You're like, "Yeah, you have some sense of what's going on." What about love? What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. What is? And maybe more specifically, how does one love wisdom? Take it out for a nice dinner? Bring it home to meet your parents? How do you love wisdom? And notice this is not having wisdom. It's loving wisdom. Can you love wisdom from afar without having it? Do you have to have wisdom in order to love wisdom? Is loving wisdom possessing wisdom? Yes.
Well, that's my answer is not an answer to what you said.
Oh.
I'm just talking about as far as like what it means to have a love of wisdom. But I guess I was just thinking, like, you can have an interest in something and not necessarily like really practice it and engage with it like every single day. Like, you can have a hobby but not do it all the time. But like, I feel like a love for something is deeper and it's something that you, like I said, something you engage with more, something that you like feed into.
Yeah. Wait, are you? I lost track because it seemed like you went in two different directions. On one hand, you seemed like you were saying that you don't have to like engage with something every day in order to love it. Then at the end, it seemed like you came the other way.
No, I was
Okay.
saying that like if you have if you just are
Like a casual relationship.
A casual, right?
Yeah.
It's just casual. You know, it's not something that you engage with every single day that you really spend time with.
Yeah.
But whenever, like, if you have a love for something, you spend a lot of time investing yourself into that.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe it even teaches you a little something about love too, to have that investment. I don't know about you guys, when I was younger and more foolish, I totally thought I was in love with the girl who lived down the street. And then I got older and I was like, you silly kid, you didn't know what love was. You just listened to too many pop songs. How does one love wisdom again? What is that, Nicole?
Well, in this sense, does love feel like you have a deeper appreciation?
An appreciation for wisdom. Do we all have it? Do we all appreciate wisdom? Maybe not the heathens outside, but all of us in the room, at least. People who take a philosophy class, we all appreciate wisdom. What else? What else does one do if one loves wisdom? Remember at our last meeting, I was talking about, like, one of the things that I talked about was, like, lots of people talk about philosophy as something that you have, like a worldview. My philosophy is blah, 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 blah. I don't even know what comes after that. I don't know what the blah, blah, blah is, because as soon as somebody says, my philosophy is, I just kind of tune out a little bit. My philosophy. The example that the analogy that I used when I brought this up was like, you go into like a chemistry class and say, my chemistry says blah, 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 blah. My mathematics says blah, 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 blah. Philosophy is better, and I think those who like engage in a disciplined sort of a way, people who would call themselves philosophers, do philosophy. Philosophy is something that you do, just like chemistry is something that you do. It's a way of asking and answering questions. Yeah, Andrew.
If you view philosophy as sort of, or not philosophy, but wisdom as sort of maybe the pursuance or the pursuing of maybe the avenues one ought to apply their knowledge, then love could just be the passionate pursuit of that.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that would, I don't know if it would like exhaust what loving wisdom would look like. It might involve this appreciation thing as well. But it seems like in order to appreciate wisdom, we maybe ought to pursue it. Yeah, to love wisdom, you've got to pursue wisdom. Maybe not all the time. Maybe not every waking moment of the day, because you got to eat. And you don't want to, get hit by a bus while you're wondering, like, is the bus real? Am I dreaming right now? Like, get out of the way. And then ask if you're dreaming, maybe, when you're safely on the curb. But yeah, the pursuit of wisdom. How does one pursue wisdom?
If I love A and I don't love B, A will be occupied in my thoughts more than B. Yes,
So
it does have the exception of hatred, but I argue by this definition that's the point.
That hate is a form of love? That's an interesting way to think about love and hate. But okay, yeah. So it's to just have it occupy your mind?
I'm thinking about wisdom more than I'm not thinking about wisdom. Well, I'm thinking about wisdom more than other things.
Yeah.
Right?
And how much I hate it, even.
It's having more processor time in my brain, right?
Yeah.
And there's wisdom as opposed to the adjective wise, right?
Sure.
It's not loving being wise, it's loving wisdom.
Loving wisdom, yeah.
Concept.
Yeah. Almost like personifying wisdom a little bit. So it's to just have it occupy your mind. And we would say the same thing about a person. If a person is occupying my mind, like say the president has been occupying my mind an awful lot lately, that means I love the president.
I kind of did the exception.
Yeah, you did. That might have been a little bit of a appeal to persuasive definition, a little bit of no true Scotsman there. But yeah, sure. If our definition of loving something ends up also including hating something, there might be something up with that. Pursuit of wisdom, I think this is important to it. I think probably the easiest way that one pursues wisdom is you ask questions. Sorry, did I run out? Yeah, sorry. Ask questions. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. Hopefully you are. As students, I would hope that students are particularly aware. They spend a lot of cognitive time thinking about questions. They're not easy to ask. You ever find yourself so confused in a class? The professor's any questions, and you're just yeah, probably, but I'm so lost, I don't even know where to begin. Asking a question is not easy. There's an art to it. This is one of the reasons why somebody pins me down and says, what is philosophy? I'll be like, hey, Philane Sophia, blah, blah, blah. But I'm kind of fond of the art of asking a question. I like that as philosophy. Art of friendship, too, ain't too bad for what philosophy is, although I suspect that some philosophers, even some philosophers here at UNCG, might disagree with me there. What is philosophy? Well, it has something to do with this. Especially when we talk about the beginning of philosophy in ancient Greece, a lot of times we have this theme of this movement from Mythos to Logos. So there's two new words that we don't know what the hell they mean either. We'll do a little. This is going to be a lot of what's going on today. We're going to introduce terms. We're going to introduce concepts and then kind of be like, what does that mean? And I'm not going to define them because the definition is kind of engaging with this search for the definition is part of doing philosophy. You don't just get handed something in order to love it or pursue it. You kind of have to do a little bit of the work yourself. Mythos to Logos. What does that look like? Sometimes we talk about this in terms of the movement out of kind of the Greek theogony, the Greek sort of way of explaining the cosmos by appeal to the actions of the gods. You guys familiar at all with the Greek gods? Take Greek mythology course or something kind of like Greek mythology. Somewhat familiar. Maybe you read Hesiod. Maybe you read Edith Hamilton. Maybe you watched Hercules, the Disney movie. Some familiarity with the Greek gods. What's notable about the Greek gods? Tell me about the Greek gods. Sure. They have human emotions. First of all, there are many of them. Second of all, yeah, they're kind of strikingly human. And they have human emotions that are kind of volatile. The Greek gods are kind of petty sometimes. They squabble with one another. They're capricious. This tells you a lot about a people. Look at the kind of the gods they make. Xenophanes is gonna talk about this at our next meeting. Or I'm gonna talk about Xenophanes talking about this at our next meeting. No, fuck it. Yeah, Xenophanes is gonna talk about it at our next meeting. We're gonna bring his spirit with a Ouija board into the room, metaphorically. Yeah, you can learn a lot about a people by looking at their gods. And this kind of makes sense when you're thinking about like the way that the early Greek world has an encounter with nature. It's regular. You can predict it, kinda. Are the Greek gods predictable? They're like humans. Are humans predictable? Kinda. All the people who were studying psychology in the room were like, God, I hope so. But they're also a little bit unpredictable too, right? So yeah, sure. Incredibly reliable patterns in like the way the stars go across the sky and the way the sun and the moon go across the sky and the seasons change and like the wheat grows and then it dies back and it's all very, very predictable until, holy shit, an eclipse. Where did that come from? I guess Apollo got angry? Holy shit, an earthquake. A comet just came out of nowhere. Not out of nowhere, obviously, right? Like increase the scope of like the way that you think about things. You'll notice there are patterns. Oh, every 70, 80 years that comet comes around. But yeah, the Greeks were kind of like grappling with this world that was kind of sort of predictable until suddenly it wasn't. Kind of like people were. And this was the way that we explained it by an appeal to kind of like gods that are strikingly human, right? So somewhat anthropomorphized notions of gods. And either you believe that story or you don't believe that story. That's kind of like the nature of theological appeals, is that like somebody says like, here's what God's like. And you go, really? Convince me. And I'm not sure like what one does for that in order to offer a convincing account. You can like say like, well, here's the story. First there was chaos, and then there was Uranos, and then like Kronos like killed his father Uranos, and then Zeus killed his father Kronos. And you tell a story, and either you accept that story or you don't accept that story. What we're going to see in this movement from Mythos to Logos, and what does Logos remind you of? Seeing logic? Yeah, that's one of the various meanings that we can think about when we're. I'm going to go ahead and do my best to problematize this concept, Logos. Logic is definitely one of the easy, obvious places that you'll go for it. But a lot of these folks are not using logic because logic as a discipline hasn't really been invented yet, won't be until Aristotle. Account, sometimes speech. The word logos is frequently means to talk, to say something, and to give an account of something verbally with a certain sort of a logic. There's a kind of a notion of orderliness that goes along with this as well. And this kind of goes back into some of the etymological roots of the word logos, like the term legain, which just means to like gather things and organize them in a certain way. Go legain some firewood from the forest. I'll get like the little sticks and I'll put them together, and then the medium-sized sticks and I'll put them together, and the big ones and I'll put them together. There, I legained a bunch of sticks. Which provides us with like a very interesting metaphor for thinking about what we do when we give an account of something. We kind of collect it and we organize it so that we can share it with other people in a way that they don't merely just accept it or reject it, but there's a reason giving going on. It's an account that is accessible to somebody else. They can interrogate it. They can criticize it instead of just accepting or rejecting it. And that supposedly is what's going on in the beginning of philosophy. And this movement from Mythos to Logos. I'll let you guys be the judge of like when it is in the story that I'm about to start telling we cross that boundary. Maybe we cross it right off the bat with Thales. Maybe he's not quite there yet. Maybe it's later. Yes?
Well, back when I learned about Logos, we used like Mythos, Pathos,
And Logos, yeah.
as like modes of persuasion.
Modes of persuasion, yeah.
So like to persuade the reader to believe like in the Logos case, be like with logic or like reason. So I would use that as a source. I don't know if that.
Yeah, that would certainly be part of it. Although if it's a form of persuasion, maybe ethos and pathos should count as logos too. That's giving an account, a speech, an ordered speech that like other people can hear and could be convincing. Not just the sort of thing that you either accept or reject. Maybe they don't make an appeal to reason, in which case like Are they forms of persuasion? Should they be forms of persuasion? I can make appeals to people that like get them to believe me, but if I'm not appealing to reason, is it trustworthy? This is why people who teach critical thinking through like philosophy departments and people who teach critical thinking through like, I don't know, maybe communications departments, sometimes we're kind of like looking at each other. They think like the philosophers want it all to be like logic and reason, and there are these other things as well. There are appeals to emotion. The philosophers are like, appeals to emotion are not trustworthy. That's how you like get a whole bunch of people like goose stepping all over Berlin. Yeah, and that sort of distinction between ethos, pathos, and logos, they're all Greek words, but those hard distinctions are not active for the Greeks just yet. Logos is a loose, sort of amorphous word. I'm going to leave these things indeterminate so that like we don't pin them down, we don't force them into like a box that we have ready-made. This is how it is that we can kind of like change our minds in order to see the world through the Greek eyes. All right, so let's make a map. There's like islands everywhere. This is just lousy with islands. It's a big part of like how Mediterranean culture began. Islands all over the place. Is this relatively familiar? This is like the Mediterranean. You know, because there's a boot right there. Yeah. So there's Italy, and there's Sicily, and like Corsica and Capri. This is Crete, and here's Greece. And Athens is going to be right there. That's going to be a pretty big focal point for our course at a certain point. We're not there yet. We're going to start here, in Meletis, the coast of Asia Minor, in what is today Turkey, with a group of philosophers who are all from Meletis, and that's why we call them the Milesians. It's not fancy, right? They're the Milesian philosophers because they're all from Meletis. 3 of them. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Bless you. They have that in common, by the way. These 3 that I'm going to talk about, they're all from Meletis, and that's why we call them the Milesians. But maybe there's also something about the way that they're thinking that kind of groups them into a school as well. It's not merely a geographical coincidence that they're grouped together. There might be other reasons as well. So Thales, and then we're going to see this fellow Anaximander, and then another one, Anaxemines. I think part of the most challenging aspect of this course is learning to say some of these names. Thales. When you were reading it without hearing anybody say it, you might have thought Thales. But yeah, Thales. Anaximander, which maybe didn't have so much trouble with. Anaxemines. Anaximines. If I hear you say it wrong, I'm going to make you like say it again until like you get it right. Just to help out. The Milesians, Thales, Anaximander, Anaximines, all coming from Meletis, and all kind of approaching this problem with like how is it that we make sense of the cosmos in roughly the same sort of way. They make an appeal to a single, unified arche is the word that usually gets talked about. Is that a familiar root, arche? Have you seen it before? Where have you seen it? What's that? Archaic? Yeah. What does that mean? Something that's archaic. Yeah, old, but that doesn't. Old doesn't quite get at like the meaning of the root. Archetype? Yeah. Architecture? What is archetype, architecture, archaic? What do they all seem to have in common? Building it, foundations. Foundations, yeah. Arche is it's a foundation. It's a foundational ordering, or maybe governing principle. And all of our Milesians are after this. And they all answer with some appeal to like one particular arche, one unified arche. This is one of the reasons why we refer to the Milesians as monists. They're all monists. Monists. That root, mono, one, right? They're going to make an appeal to one arche. And this is so supposedly going to explain everything. In fact, an awful lot of the pre-Socratics, you can get like a Cliff's Notes sort of like placemat version of pre-Socratic philosophy just by trying to memorize. It's not going to be a very thorough or interesting version of pre-Socratic philosophy, by the way, but it'll help you kind of like have a structure to organize all of the other things that you come across. Is trying to get every pre-Socratic philosopher to answer the question, everything, or to complete the sentence, everything is. Or at least a lot of the pre-Socratic philosophers. We'll kind of understand them through this phrase. Everything is, everything is, everything is. Thales says everything is water. Everything is water. Not order. Water. 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 Water is the order. I like that. That's got it rhymes, so it must be true. Pathos. Everything is water. Come on. Everything is water? Why would anybody think that everything was water? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, immediately you thought to yourself, like, everything's water? Come on. But like, I don't trust the rest of this book if this is how it begins.
I agree with him.
Oh, you agree with him? Ooh, everything is water. Then I should not make so much fun of it. We have, a descendant of Thales here. So, everything is water. How am I supposed to understand this? And you said through some sort of like idea of nature, right? Do you need water for nature? We need water. Yeah, you're a lot water. Like 70-something%, is that right? Water, like enough water that like you don't want to go in a microwave, like ever. That's not going to be good. Yeah, you're a lot of water. In fact, every living thing is a lot of water. As a matter of fact, if you like find a pool of standing water and just like sit and watch it for a while, life's going to happen in it. You need water for life. You need moisture for life, right? Life happens where there's moisture. Where there is no moisture, life doesn't happen. That's how you keep the mildew out of your closets, or how you keep the mildew in your closets. Moisture. Or in your socks, or like whatever, right? Your gym shoes, your gym bag. If it stays nice and moist, there will be life. You don't want life in your gym bag. Don't let it be moist. Furthermore, where does water come from? Like, it comes out of the sky. You dig, especially if you live right on the coast. You dig far enough down, boom, water. It's everywhere. This is maybe one of the reasons why you might think that Thales thought everything was water. It's everywhere. It's always present whenever life is happening. It seems to be some sort of natural principle. Maybe Thales just never went to a desert and realized that you could have nature without moisture. Or without much moisture, at least. But yeah, I don't know, man. Is he gone from Mythos to Logos yet? Are we getting like a solid account?
I think the principle that he and the rest of the Milesians kind of nailed down is that there is a fundamental building block.
That there is a fundamental, and watch out for this idea of building block. I'm going to try to disabuse you of this idea of a building block when we're thinking about the Milesians. There's a fundamental ordering principle that is unified, that is one. Building blocks, that's one particular approach to this. That's the atomistic approach. We'll see them in a little while, Democritus and Leucippus and other atomists. When Thales says everything is water, he doesn't mean that like there are little water molecules that are building blocks of everything and everything's made out of them. He doesn't know anything about that. He approaches water the same way that you do. Like when you drink a glass of water, you're thinking like all of these molecules, billions and billions just going into my mouth. Or is like it's just water. It's like one single extended substance, right? It's one thing. I drink one water. I drink a beer. A beer is like one self-contained. I don't just drink one beer. I drink many beers, but they're all kind of unified, extended things. And when I drink one beer, I don't say I drink many beer molecules, like Avogadro's number of molecules. No. It's just one thing. And Thales is also thinking about water as like one thing, one extended continuous substance, not atomistic just yet. We're not there yet. But like, why water? Aside from the other reasons that we've heard of.
Wouldn't you like have to have some concept of that though, of like the building block kind of idea? Because you can look at a tree and say like that doesn't look like water, but like maybe there's water in it. And
Yeah.
It's like being made of water. Like wouldn't you have to have some concept of that to say everything is water?
I mean, a tree that's alive, you chop it down. The wood is wet, though, right? You have to dry it before you burn it.
Right. So
There's some moisture in it.
Have some knowledge of like, okay, water is a part.
Oh, but it's not just a part of everything. It's not one of several. These guys are monists. It's the thing. Everything is water.
So the tree is just water.
Tree, yeah. Yeah, the tree is water. I'm water. You're water. The desk is water. The sky is water. Everything's water.
So the only thing that differentiates what is the bits of the water.
Yeah, like maybe what's going on. And this is like a big part of like why we go with what's water. I don't know if Thales makes the grade just yet. But note one of the things that he's going to, like with his single arche, his monistic arche, is he's going for something that's flowy, right? Water flows. It's sometimes like the very definition of like flowing and changing. Not the very definition. That's not right. That's speaking too strongly. But it's a go-to metaphor for change and flowing. And if we want one thing to be like the fundamental arche for all the things, it's got to be a changing thing, right? It's got to be the sort of thing that can flow and change. Otherwise, everything would look exactly the same. But not everything looks exactly the same. It seems like there's a plurality of things. It seems like there's all kinds of stuff. The world's made of like this and me and you and like the notebook and the number 2 maybe, who knows? But if there's going to be one thing that they're all made of, it's going to have to be a changeable thing. And it's not just that like water is flowy and not just that you can find it everywhere, especially if you live on the coast. It's that we experience it in the course of like normal human activity in its liquid form, in its solid form, and in its gaseous form. So sure, why not? That's all that a rock is. It's like ice. It's just another form of ice. And air, that's just another form of like water vapor. What happens when you heat water up and it boils off and when you see the steam kind of rise up? Of course, air is made of water. I can turn water into air very easily. It's fire water? Ooh, that one's a little bit tough to try to figure out how fire is water. Maybe Thales understood this, maybe not. But for like anybody who's like taken some serious chemistry classes, what happens? What is every single fire is combustion. What are the products of perfect combustion? Carbon dioxide, yeah, and water. Carbon dioxide and water. Burn a fire, you produce carbon dioxide and water. Fire makes water, so fire must be made of water. I don't know if Thales actually understood that. There's not going to be an oxidation theory of like combustion until like 1780s in Lavoisier. We're going to go through a whole like phlogiston theory that's kind of weird and wacky. So like that's maybe stretching a little bit, but like it's me trying to like figure out a way like how could Thales possibly be right about this? How does this make sense? And he's at something. He's at some idea of like one thing that is everything, but it's going to have to be changeable in order for this to work. Yeah.
I just want to say about like the logos. He is kind of breaking into logos
A little bit.
Yeah, because he has an explanation for it. Like he said something about the land floating on water.
Yeah.
I mean, if you dig in the land and you find water, it kind of makes sense that it could be floating on it.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like it does kind of make sense. He is making a little bit of an appeal to logos. It's a sort of a naturalistic sort of a thing, though, right? It seems maybe more like for scientists than the first philosopher, if there's supposed to be a distinction between those at all. Kate.
If that is like how can we distinct like the world's floating from a Greek myth that the gods cause everything? Isn't it the same sort of
Yeah, doesn't it seem like the same way? I just tell a story. Yeah, I just tell a story and either you accept it or you don't. But maybe I'll say, like, if you say, I don't believe that the earth is floating on water, I'll be like, look, I'll prove it. Dig a hole. Keep digging, keep digging. Ah, we get to water.
Couldn't they prove the gods like that and be like, oh yeah, look, that star, God.
Like, yeah, that's Apollo. See, there he goes. Very slowly. Yeah, you certainly could. Yeah, so yeah, I'm not necessarily convinced that we're completely into this. We've completed this movement from Mythos to Logos by the time we get to Thales. Thales is doing some like really kooky, crazy stuff. There's a reason why people regard him as a philosopher. People at the time regarded him as a philosopher, mostly just because he was a renowned, wise person. He was one of the 7 sages of Greece at one time, all over the Greek world. So kind of ranging from here all over this map. There were like 7 people who were regarded as like the 7 wisest people in the known world, and Thales was one of them. An Athenian, or kind of like one of the godfathers of the Athenian city, Solon, is one of the other 7. And it's earned. He was a statesman. He was a politician. He was a naturalist. He was a military strategist. Did you guys get the story in the reading of like the army had to cross the river, and they were like, how are we going to cross the river? And Thales is like, I got this, guys. Bring everybody right up to the edge of the river. Dig a trench behind us, almost complete it, and then like once everybody's like safe and secure, open up the trench behind us and divert the water. And we didn't cross the river crossed us, maybe, or like we moved the river behind us. Yeah, a very clever move. Thales predicted an eclipse. And predicted an eclipse that, like, far over here, unbeknownst to Thales, I'm not even sure exactly where it was. One of the things I'm doing this semester is I'm brushing up on my philosophy in the Islamic world knowledge, which is minimal at this point. But there was a battle going on in Persia at the time of this eclipse, and like that battle ended as soon as the eclipse happened. Everyone was like, what the fuck? And like freaked everybody out. And like the armies just kind of like said, like, I'm done with this. I'm going home. But Thales predicted it. He said, an eclipse is coming. I have no idea how he predicted that. I'm not even sure if he did predict it. This is like legend, right? This is one of the issues with the pre-Socratic philosophers, is that like what we have of them is little bits and pieces, fragments. Sometimes fragments from the actual person. In the case of Thales, not even close. Just little fragments of things that other people said about Thales. So it's kind of sometimes unreliable. There's another story about Thales that he predicted a drought. He predicted a fallow year for a bumper year for the olive crop. Not a fallow year. He predicted that there was going to be a really big year for olives, and nobody else like believed that there was going to be a really big year for olives. So he bought up all of the olive presses in the area at a really, really cheap price. Nobody thought that there was going to be anything in olives. And then there was a big bumper crop, and everybody wanted to. Olives don't last very long. If you want olives to last long, you got to press that stuff into oil, and then you can ship it all over the Greek Isles and trade with other people if you have olive oil. And if you want to make olive oil, you got to have access to a press. And Thales owned all the presses, and he jacked the prices up and made a ton of money. He just got filthy rich on that olive crop. So the story goes. And afterwards said to people like, by the way, I didn't do this for the money. I just did this to show you guys that if a philosopher wants to make money, they totally can. That's just not how I choose to like apply my talents and energy. And then kind of like got out of business altogether. So the story goes. Thales, widely considered to be a wise person. We can see some of the other stuff that he did that like begins a movement from Mythos to Logos. The way that we're going to put him into conversation with the other Milesians is through this everything is water business. And it's close, it's beginning. We start to see some more interesting things happen with the other Milesians, like Anaximander, who says everything is, yeah, what's the word? I'm gonna keep it in the Greek because I'm not sure what the hell this means. Apeiron is the Greek word. Everything is apeiron, according to Anaximander, according to all the people who talk about Anaximander, because we don't have like Anaximander's diary or anything. He wasn't publishing Everything is apeiron. Apeiron. Note the alpha privative prefix, like amoral or asexual or atheistic or something like that. That prefix means not, right? It's like whatever comes afterwards, it's like without that thing. Peiron or peros. Peros. Same root as we find today in the word perimeter. What is the perimeter of a shape? Yeah, it's the limit, it's the boundary, it's what defines something, right? So something that is apeiros is, yeah, we might say infinite. We might say indefinite.
Boundless.
Yeah, boundless or if I want to keep the alpha privative like thing instead of putting the less at the end, unbounded. Sure, all of these things start to kind of grasp about for what apeira or apeiron would be. Anaximander says everything is this. The unlimited, the indefinite, the infinite.
He's got Spinoza beat.
Like time-wise, sure. Quality of exposition, not so sure about that. Everything is the infinite, the indefinite. But all the things are definite. This is a thing, right? It's got limits, it's finite, it's not indefinite. That's part of what makes it a thing, is that it's a definite thing. How is everything the indefinite? How is everything, yeah, in the back? That like you could potentially be anything. So like yeah, your future is unwritten in this sense. Everything's future is unwritten. It's indefinite.
If we limit ourselves, like we're like, oh, we just have to do this, or I just have to do this.
Huh.
But it really says
You could be anything. But you have to be something, right? You could be anything, but you have to be some definite thing. Could you become like completely indefinite? What would it mean to like become completely indefinite?
Is a thing its effects.
What's that? They remember them as definite, right? Gods are infinite, not the Greek gods.
Wasn't he saying that there's not observable? There's like stuff that
Sure. Yeah, sure. Unobservable, right? It would have to be the indefinite, the infinite would have to be unobservable because to observe anything has to be finite, has to be definite, right? How can I see it if it's not a definite thing? How can I define it? How can I know it? It's indefinite. Undefinable would be another way of saying this, right? Yeah, Andrew.
So to just clarify, you did say is rather than a part of, right?
Well, we're not sure exactly what Anaximander said about
Because if you
this.
were to say it would then be a part of the infinite, then that would kind of be similar to our conception of what the universe is.
Yeah, from Simplicius in the 5th century AD, we get this account. And the source of coming to be for existing things is that into which destruction too happens according to necessity, katata kreon, according to necessity. For they pay penalty and retribution to each other for their injustices according to the assessment of time. This is talking about how everything comes from the apeiron. Not everything is made of the apeiron. And maybe that's how we would mean it, but everything comes from the indefinite. Think about it this way, maybe. There it is, the indefinite. Not really, right? Because there it is, right? But like, imagine there's the indefinite, and then like I take the indefinite and I just kind of like, I carve out a little corner of it and I define boundaries. Now there's a definite thing. It's kind of come out of the undetermined, the indeterminate. Maybe unformed stuff, formless stuff, that I can kind of define something out of it. And then what happens if I destroy this? It goes back into like the infinite, the indefinite, the unformed. The source of coming to be for existing things is that into which destruction too necessarily happens, according to necessity. And notice that next part, for they pay penalty and retribution to each other for their injustice, according to the assessment of time. Justice demands that all things that are created also must be destroyed. And this principle that like grounds everything, this foundational, ooh, this is going to be tough. The ordering and the governing principle is that which is like without order, which is without definition, which is without boundary. But we have this idea that like, ooh, necessity demands that everything that's created is also destroyed. We have like broader sorts of like way more abstract engagements with what a singular monistic arche would be like, coming from Anaximander here, this idea that everything, not only do we get this sense of like what the idea of stuff is. Thales says the simple stuff that makes up everything is water. Anaximander is saying like, what is the idea of stuff in the first place? Like what is the materiality of material? Without it being any one particular definable material. What is just stuff? Unformed stuff, intangible stuff, the stuff that like gets formed in order to become a thing. But before there's any form, formless matter. We're going to look at this kind of interplay that's suddenly introduced here between matter or stuff and the form that gives it its kind of identity and thingliness. This is going to be a theme throughout all of the ancient philosophers. Aristotle's going to hit it really hard. And he's also going to call into question, like, does this even make any sense? Formless matter? Formless matter. I don't know about that. Really big, sophisticated step forward from Thales to Anaximander. To go from everything is water to everything is the apeiron, the indefinite, infinite, whatever that is, stuff. That isn't anything in particular yet.
What was the time difference between
Everything is everything, but now he's getting us to think about, like, when I say everything, you're thinking about, like, all the things, right? And he's saying, like, yeah, everything is, but, like, all the things are, like, one stuff that, like, is undefined. Yeah, the stuff itself is undefined. It becomes defined when things come into being. But everything that comes into being and can be created, everything that, like, has some kind of definite form or shape or boundary to it that makes it a thing, when that gets destroyed, back into the ether it goes. So we get a sense, too, of like creation and destruction as somehow being related to this idea of like how matter and form interact with one another. Not just that, but like this is according to justice as far as Anaximander is concerned. There's a paying of a debt, katata crayon, according to the debt. Everything that lives, it's got a debt to pay. You came out of the apeiron, so someday you're going to have to go back to the apeiron. It's a principle that's like beyond the physical principle now. It's starting to get into like other sorts of territory. Got ideas of like things coming to be and perishing, including human souls, including we're talking about life and death here. Yeah, like what were you before you were born? Were you like waiting in some lobby? There was no you. And then you were created. What happens to you when you die? Maybe the same, you go back to the same place that you came from which is no place. You became a no thing, no particular thing. Or or everything. Now we're in weird territory. Nothing and everything are starting to gone two opposite ways on the horseshoe and come back around at the same place. Oh, nothing and everything are kind of the same thing. They have to be the same thing. This is the one fundamental arche. And then Anaximines. This is, by the way, Thales is we're talking like 580s BCE. Anaximander, more like 540s. Anaximines as well. They're like rough contemporaries, Anaximander and Anaximines. Both of them who are reported to have been pupils of Thales, lived in the same place as Thales, and so we see it like Anaximander is like totally building off of like Thales introduces this idea everything is blank and something that is sort of like formless and shapeless that will like take the shape of its container, like water, right? Something that can become everything. And Anaximander runs with it and says like, yeah, everything is the indefinite, the apeiron. Huge idea, which is like a weird little puzzle. It's like Anaximander dropped a Rubik's cube. So everything is the apeiron. Everything is unlimited. And you're like, huh, what's that all about? Pick it up, start to kind of move it around. It's one idea that like demands to be tinkered with in order to be understood. You have to see like how do all the little moving parts work with this? Anaximene says everything is air. What a disappointing step back, right? Everything is air. There are two things. I can think of at least one thing. Yeah, yeah, sure. At least one thing that Anaximenes is adding into the mix here. He not only, oh yeah, go for it.
Doesn't he also say about the reading?
Yeah, yeah, see if you can find it. We've got less than 5 minutes left, so I want to wrap this up. So while you're finding it, I'm going to keep talking. Oh, did you?
On
Just read it for us.
he said the material principles, air and
The air and the infinite, yeah? We see they're all kind of clustered around this idea. What was interesting about water was it was kind of like indefinite, that it was mushy, that it could change. Same sort of thing here. So maybe we ought not be trying to pin Thales down as literally saying that everything is made of H2O. Or Anaximenes saying everything is made of like what this combination of nitrogen, carbon dioxide, like whatever it is that like air is. Maybe they're all getting at this idea that it's something indefinite. And whereas we were talking about with Thales that like this kind of moisture, that like the moistness, people hate that word I hear. The moistness of life is something that like Thales seems to be drawing on. Like, why go for moisture when you could go for breath? When you could go for like spirit, which literally has the same roots as like aspiration, which is not just a wish or a hope, but it's breathing. What's that? And Anaximenes also adds to the mix here that like he gives us a mechanism. A mechanism for how this works. He says this process of rarefication and condensation is responsible for the different sort of profiles, the different forms, the different looks that we can get from air. If you condense air, if you press it together, it'll become water. And if you press water together, it'll become earth. And if you rarefy air, it'll become fire. And like I heard some like chuckles, some scoffs, but like from like a molecular perspective, contemporary molecular perspective, pretty close, right? What's the difference between a solid, a liquid, and a gas? It's just how far, yeah, it's the energy that like also then kind of becomes a function of like how far apart or how independent are all the molecules from one another. Now, when it comes to something like water, he gets it like a little bit wrong. Water doesn't compress to turn ice. It actually has to expand a little bit to become ice. Good thing. This is why ice floats. But yeah, it seems to be onto something. And in fact, like rarefying or kind of pulling apart air, that's not too far apart from what a fire is. Or a plasma, like the decohering of the atoms themselves. He's onto something here, but notice what we have from Anaximenes, and we get these kind of like two possible trajectories going on in the Milesians. We have, starting from Thales, everything is water, and we get this idea of monism. Sometimes the Milesians are thought of specifically as material monists. Because the one thing, that one arche, that one single fundamental governing principle that everything is ordered according to, or governed by, is some kind of material. For Thales, it's water. For Anaximenes, it's air. For Anaximander, ooh. Is it material? Is it matter? Is the apeiron matter? That's tough. I'm not sure if Anaximander is giving us a mechanistic view of what's going on. He might be reaching for something different. You might be wondering, like, well, what would that something different be like? This starts a trajectory of a shift away from the material, the concrete, to the abstract when we're thinking of some sort of like fundamental arche. An arche that's abstract, that has nothing to do with materiality at all. The plan today was to talk about the Pythagoreans, who totally nail this. They are like the abstractest of the abstracts. Maybe other folks beat them, but give like a really, really clear counterpoint to what's going on with the material monists, with like this approach, or at least one way of understanding this approach. And Anaximander gives us a kind of like a little wrinkle. He's like the oddball in this group, who's proposing something that like maybe we can understand in a more abstract way as well. We're going to be a little bit crunched for time in our next meeting because I'm going to have to cover the Pythagoreans, as well as Xenophanes, as well as Heraclitus. Holy shit, Heraclitus. That guy is like Mr. Riddles. So we'll start with that and start looking at folks who are taking a more abstract approach. And next week, we're going to get our first writing assignment, our first like reflection draft, and I'll talk a little bit about what that's like. I'll be posting it sometime this weekend. You can get a look at it. It has to do with Anaximander and whether or not he fits in the same group as his other Milesians, whether or not he should really count as a material monist. Thanks for sticking around for a couple of extra minutes. I will see you guys on Tuesday.